In this video, we're going to take a look at the template library, which contains all of the dispute letters that come with your platform. Now, you can change all of the ones that we have. So we have a bunch of them for each round already listed, and a couple of miscellaneous ones down at the bottom, which cover things like, disputing addresses or personal information or bankruptcies and whatnot. So we're going to take a look at one of these letters. I know a lot of you like to make some changes or build your own letters. So I just wanted to cover a couple of points that might trip you up if you are doing custom ones. So I'm just going to take a look at one of these letters here. So we'll just do, investigation letter, for example. So we use tags, right? So tags are going to pull in all the relevant information for that client and any disputes that you have identified. So again, you can customize everything that says on here. Just make sure that you include the variables as shown to pull the relevant information. But so the way that this works is, let's say that you did an import and you defined 5 items that you wanted to dispute. So when you go to generate letters, you're going to pick a letter template, for example, this one, and then you're going to select the 5 items that you want to include within this letter. So when you select those and you generate the PDF, what it's going to do is going to take this letter, obviously fill in all the contact information and personal information, but right here is where it's actually going to display all the items that you flagged for dispute. So if there were 5 items, it's going to replace this one tag with 5 different entries, right? And each entry, in this case, what this tag does is it'll pull in the name, so like capital 1, right? Then it will have the account number right after it. Then it's going to have your reason, whichever one you had selected. And then it's going to have the instruction. Okay, so it kind of goes like that in that format. And then if you had, that's for one entry, right? So if you'd selected 5 of them, it's going to do this, 3, 4, 5. And of course, it's going to display, Best Buy or, whatever the other disputable items were. And that's how this tag is going to render them. Down here at the bottom, you see one that says personal information and dispute instruction. So when this happens, it's actually going to detail out which item is incorrect. So if you had, an address dispute or something, right? So then it's actually going to show the correct address that they need to compare to what's on file, and any instruction that you gave, something like, my personal information is not correct, please correct it now. And it's going to work in a similar fashion to how this works, where it's going to, so let's say you disputed the address and the date of birth. So you would actually have, the address and date of birth that this tag will then render in its place. Obviously, it's not this information, but yeah, the address and the date of birth. And this is how you can use one letter for multiple dispute items, because really what we're doing is, it doesn't matter if it's a collection or if it's an account, you can still dispute them in one letter. Some people like to have letters specifically for collections, in which case, when you're building that, you would only select the collection items when you're building the letter under the letters tab. You would only select those particular ones, then you would pick the letter that applies to it, and then you would merge them together, and then you can go back and do a different letter for, say, accounts, if you wanted to split them out that way. But the most important tag is really this one here. So dispute item and explanation. It will render it like this. Now over here on the right, we have a couple of variables. As you can see, first name, last name, those are all kind of being used here. But there are some other ones, right? So dispute info. So if you wanted to individually display just the name, just the account number, just the reason, you can do that using these tags right here. There have been instances where somebody has decided to replace this tag with something like, account name and account number, but then we're wondering why the reasons and instructions weren't displaying. That would be why, right? So if you want to use the one that shows them all, it's the dispute item and explanation. And you'll kind of see this as you're building letters. You'll see what it renders, and you can always come back to your custom letter and make that adjustment and just change it up. There's also creditor info. If you are doing a creditor letter, you can include that at the top. There's some date information and your company logo if you want to include it. But generally speaking, on letters, you probably don't want to do that. So this is a way that you can modify what we have, or build as many custom letters as you want. Just give it a title so they kind of group all together, maybe use the same naming format so it kind of puts them in the same spot, but it's entirely up to you. And you can put a little description here. If you are working with a team or with some outsourcers, for example, you can put a description as to what this letter is about. It's optional. And then, of course, there is a category that you can put any of these into as well. All right, so hopefully that's enough information to help you build custom letters. If you have ever questions on these, of course, reach out to our team.